Good afternoon, ladies and gents. It's the 17th of March, 2025, and large amounts of madness we've seen and heard on the political stage last week and the week before, probably over the last 3 or 4 weeks, to be honest. And it continues, or it's likely to continue this week. Before we start, my apologies because this content is probably 10 days old. As I thought I'd uploaded it to YouTube, and when I went to check only yesterday, I'd seen that the upload had failed. However, the content isn't really sort of governed by dates or events, the particular events sort of over, those 2 weeks, shall we say. But it's more so about why certain things are sort of being said on the political stage. I'm going to keep this as short as possible because there's so much talk online, social media, and much of it sort of spilling out over onto mainstream news now. That should start ringing alarm bells to some of the viewers, to be honest. The Ukraine war is at the forefront of news right now, being orchestrated by many, and unfortunately, much of what you're hearing is bollocks. We've still got mainstream news at the moment, drip feeding. Let's call it drip feeding the masses for obvious reasons. But I'm going to be brutally honest with you. All of the signs are there. And unfortunately, for those of you that have only just joined the party, these signs have been apparent and evident for the last 3 years now. So if you've just joined the party, then you better buckle up because the shit is hitting the fan and global conflicts are starting to synchronize, meaning that the conflicts across the globe, in all regions, that being Europe, the Middle East, Asia, as well as others, those countries are clearly preparing for war. Unlike my previous videos, instead of a load of boring slides seen through all of my previous videos, I'm going to be just scrolling through some critical information on the screen, which is it's going to be a website really. It's in relation to a book. Um, but it's critical information that's critical to this video, just to sort of help you see really what we're talking about. Let me just bring that up now before we carry on. I mentioned in a couple of videos last week, I believe, that this whole Trump and his saga shenanigans have, for me, they've severely distracted my train of thought over the last couple of weeks. And not sure if it's been for you guys out there as well, but in terms of me trying to sort of track, well, just keep track of it all in view of our preps mainly, because that's the, that's the whole point of this. It's becoming even harder as a task for me. So with that, I've spent some hours trying to just filter out some of this shit, of which there's actually just too much of it right now, and I'm trying to get some kind of logical and meaningful explanation, um, just to allow me to sort of better focus on the task in hand, that being preparing. That's the whole purpose of this, preparing for a possible scenario. You can't prepare unless you know what you're preparing for. This is going to be my first piece of advice to you all. Don't concentrate on where that spotlight is shining. Uh, do not focus on these small singular events, and instead just try and look at the bigger picture. One thing for sure is happening, and that is NATO are virtually at war with Russia. And if you think I'm talking a load of rubbish, then you're probably just better off getting off the channel because I don't really have time to be walking around on eggshells and worrying about other people's feelings. I haven't asked anyone to jump onto this channel and listening to sort of me waffling on. You're in control of your own lives, ladies and gents. So if you don't like it, move on because there's one thing I am trying to do here, and that is to complete strangers, um, such as yourselves, is to sort of just highlight to you that your lives and the lives of your families could quite easily be turned upside down very, very soon. And I don't take great pleasure in, sort of putting that information out there. But what I am trying to do is just highlight a possibility, make you aware, and therefore allow you or give you the opportunity to go off and prepare yourselves. If you want to see through all of this shit, particularly around Trump and Ukraine, I'm just going to stick with that. I'm going to put this next theory to you. And once you've sort of listened to it, you can decide on whether what you're seeing right now or what you're hearing out there right now could be one or more of these outlined strategies of war. Or if you think that Trump and co are, are out there, just talking a load of rubbish and, a load of nonsense, and that's fine. The choice is yours. This is what I think's happening. And the reason why I'm going to go down this road is because I know Trump comes across as an idiot much of the time, but I I also know that he clearly knows what's happening and what's at stake here. He and the United States, and when I say the United States, I'm talking about the government, the intelligence, and the military. They know full well what's going on and have done probably for quite some time now, years. There is no way on God's earth he's as stupid as he's making out. It's it's just all being portrayed that way, just to fool the rest of us. Because let's get it right. The only, well, you only have to sort of fool the sheep, and that's 85% of the populations that you have to convince. So that's it, and that's easy. No disrespect to any of the sheep out there, but it's easy. It's just easy. Anyway, let's not go down that rabbit hole. Right. Before I say this next piece of information, can I just ask that you try and make sure you've got no distractions around you. Just block out any distractions because you need to just kind of try and get as much of your full attention on what I'm about to say, without being sidetracked or anything like that. When I say this, just try and think carefully about everything that's gone on over the last 2 months since Trump hit the office. Just remember all of those key announcements being made on the political and public stage in front of billions of people across the globe. So there's a good book called 33 Strategies of War. And unless you work for government, intelligence services, or the military, then this is going to be new news to you. And of course, there are strategies of war. But I want to point out just there's one main one. Okay, there's 33 of them, and I'm not going to go through all 33, but there's one that really sort of sticks out to me. When you listen to these strategies, try and picture what Trump is and has been sort of doing and or sort of saying on the political stage over the last, let's say, 2 to 4 weeks, and just ask yourself whether or not this is one or more of those strategies being played out. I'm going to start with the strategy that instantly jumps out to me. Hang on a minute. This strategy 23. Let's just bring it down here. Yeah, strategy 23. Okay. Um, this is the one that jumps out to me. I've gone through them all. I've read through them all. I can pick pieces and drop pieces into all of the strategies. But this one is relevant to the bullshit that's been coming out on the political stage over the last month or two, should we say? Because I'm just struggling to accept and believe that what he and the American administration are coming out with is actually true. They're saying one thing today, for it then to change, or be reverted or overturned the following week. But again, that's government for you, no matter what country you're in. Firstly, when I say this week's antics or last week's antics, I'm talking about the meeting of all these leaders over the last couple of weeks to discuss a potential peace deal. And that in itself is confusing. A peace deal would have to be between Russia and Ukraine, but the deal part is where Trump and his merry men come in. Because remember, of course, these fuckers are all billionaire businessmen, and they're running the US like a business, or at least trying to. We've had Trump calling Zelensky a dictator, and then when asked about it, he couldn't remember making a statement. He's mentioned over, the months, if not years, I suppose, on and off, how he wants to pull the US out of the NATO alliance. More recent bullshit has been in and around some of those executive orders that he signed off in January, many of which are going nowhere. The renaming of the Mexican Gulf, not sure what that's about. The war on the South American cartels. Well, that must have been going on for the last 30 years. Drill, sorry, and fuck the electric cars, I think was one of those out there. Um, how Canada are going to become an American state, how Trump thinks he's going to take Greenland from the Danish royals, how he's going to enforce, or is enforcing actually, and has, and will continue to do so. And I say generously, 25% tariffs to anyone not wanting to dance to his tune. But those percentages could go up on the 1st of April. How he has tried to embarrass other leaders with yet more shit. Macron of France having to correct Trump in public. How Starmer rocks up to the White House with a fucking party invite to see the royal family. And only recently, how Trump belittles Zelensky on the world stage and ends up embarrassing himself. And quite frankly, the list goes on. But when listening to all this dribble, it's got to the point for me. This is some of it it just seems too much. It's too over the top. It's kind of like a play. It's being played out. So much so, even people. Well, there's a lot of people out there just not even listening to many things that are coming out of Trump's mouth at the moment. I didn't want to talk about it, but I have to for you to sort of better understand what's really going on here. So these 33 strategies of war, because let's face it, I've been saying this for the last 3 years, and so have many others, that the New World War has already begun. And we, that being the European stroke NATO, have been preparing for this war and pretty much almost ready. So let's look at a couple of these strategies, or one in particular, and it'll all start making sense in a couple of minutes. We're going to start with this. What is it? Part 5 of the book is the unconventional dirty warfare strategy. 23 states. Let me just highlight that there. It states, now listen to this carefully. Strategy 23 states weave a seamless blend of fact and fiction. These are what's known as the misperception strategies. So deception is not about making sort of big shows of elaborate distractions. Most people are aware you'll try and deceive them and won't fall for it. The best deceptions mix reality and fiction. Spread your deceptions to people who believe in the lie themselves, and they'll work to convince others naturally of your deception. So, in this example, that will be the leaders of the 32 NATO member states believe in the lie themselves, because, of course, if this strategy is being played out, they don't know about it. In this example, I'm just going to assume, obviously somebody's going to know about it. But let's just suggest that Trump himself and also Mark Rutte of the Secretary General of NATO are likely to just know the plan. This is speculation, guys, but let's just stick with me with this, yeah? If you're talking about 32 countries, which are 32 member countries of the NATO alliance, each with 3 key representatives. So that's going to be a president, a prime minister, the secretary of state, that's going to be their sidekick. And of course, there's also going to be the head of the armed forces, someone like the chief of defense staff or of said country, should we say, for example. So that's 3 key representatives that are likely to be talking, making decisions, rocking up, and being right up there in relation to any of these wars and conflicts unfolding. So, with that in mind, that is 3 representatives from each country, which is equaling 96 key members or front men of the NATO alliance. And you cannot have all of those 96. Let's just say 100, okay? You can't have 100 key members across the alliance knowing the deception being played out. So instead, a couple of them are likely to know, and that's it. Next, make up realities that match your enemy's desire, and they'll deceive themselves into believing it. So so for this one, let's say Putin's desire would be nothing more than seeing the NATO alliance fall to bits, sign of weakness and perfect for Russia. Right, I'm just gonna, where are we? Let's just go here. Okay. Since no creature can survive without the ability, hang on a minute, where is that there? Sorry, getting ahead of myself. Right. Since no creature can survive without the ability to see or sense what is going on around it, you must make it hard for your enemies to know what's going on around them, including what you are doing. So, disturb their focus and you weaken their strategic powers. People's perceptions are filtered through their emotions. They tend to interpret the world according to what they want to see, feed their expectations, manufacture a reality to match their desires, and they will fool themselves. The best deceptions are based on ambiguity, mixing fact with fiction so that the one cannot be disentangled from the other. Okay, let me just say that again. The best deceptions are based on ambiguity, mixing fact with fiction so that one cannot disentangle from the other. Control people's perceptions of reality and you control them. So this is really this is a good intro into strategy 23. Just by reading this, the pieces start to fall into place immediately. People's perceptions are filtered through their emotions. I think Putin is running through these wars, these invasions, whilst he's personally engaged, meaning I think this whole Russia versus NATO saga is personal. He is the one that believes that the Soviet Union has been broken, and it is Putin that feels threatened by the West. You can see, from some of his speeches that he gets emotionally involved sometimes, especially when it isn't going his way, and he kind of gets a little bit angry, threatening various countries across Europe with nuclear obliteration. So that's a clear sign that he's not happy with what he's hearing or what's being done. More than likely, your concept of deception is wrong. It does not entail elaborate illusions or all sorts of showy distractions. Deception should mirror reality. So your false mirror must conform to people's desires and expectations. It must incorporate things that are visibly true. It must seem somewhat banal, like life itself, and can have contradictions. Okay, so just when I read that, just think about all these statements that are being made, and all of this showmanship, and all of these fallouts, and all of these statements that is anyway. What I'm trying to say is just try and see it from this perspective. So Putin's expectations probably weren't the collapse of NATO and the EU over the last couple of months, but certainly an unexpected desire. And what with this shit show out there on the daily political stage, shall we say, for many is visibly true. I'm not being funny when I talk about the sheep and all those sort of people. They're listening to all this, and they all think that this is true. Everything that these politicians are saying and doing, they actually think is real. Trump seems to be convincing millions of people of that. He wants this war to end. He wants nothing less than peace. Believes that it can be stopped in the corporate boardroom, negotiating like it's some kind of business deal. Trump is also sort of being seen to not fit into the NATO alliance, and thinking that it's either America's way or no way. He's also leading the masses to believe now that he and Zelensky have fallen out, how there is no business deal to be done, how Zelensky doesn't respect the US, and because he's rocked up in he's rocked up to the White House in a whistle or a suit for anyone, outside of the UK. Let me say this bit again. The title of this strategy is Weave a Seamless Blend of Fact and Fiction, the Misperception Strategy. When you read that, and then you listen to what all these events are sort of telling people, you start to see what's happening here. Keys to the warfare. Okay, so there are 6 keys. I'm only going to go through 5. One of them is irrelevance. In essence, military deception is about subtly manipulating and distorting signs of our identity and purpose to control the enemy's vision of reality and get them to act on their misperceptions. It is the art of managing appearances, and it can create a decisive advantage for whichever side uses it better. So the key words here being manipulating, distorting, controlling the enemy's vision of reality, misperceptions, and managing appearances, all of which You and I, the Russians, the EU, and hopefully Putin are absorbing like a sponge, and they're being sucked into it. Thanks to the misinformation across all of the social media platforms, mainstream news, and last but not least, the lying politicians themselves. So, to master this art, you must embrace its necessity and to find creative pleasure in manipulating appearances as if you were directing a film. So, this is the theatre of war, really. That comes to mind like a game of Risk for the elites, but either way, a game, a show, as it were. Part two of this. It's not part two. These are the key. These are the key warfares. The keys to warfare. Sorry. The following are six main forms of military deception, each with its own sort of advantage. But I'm sure there's only five of them that are really going to come into play here. So let's start with the false front, and that states that this is the oldest form of military deception. The false front. Okay, let me just say that again, the false front. So are the politicians out there presenting a false front? Okay, because it's the oldest form of military deception. It originally involved making the enemy believe that one was weaker than in fact was the case. So this is absolutely key. Making NATO NATO making the enemy believe that it is weak with the fallout between the US and EU and or NATO, and that Russia is in a stronger position as a result of this. The appearance of weakness often brings out people's aggressive side, making them drop strategy and prudence for an emotional and violent attack. Now, guys, this part is important for what is kind of happening now or what's happening across Ukraine last week. The Kyiv Independent reported last week that Russia launched nearly 1,200 bombs, 870 drones, and over 80 missiles, including ballistic missiles, against Ukraine over that last week alone. And the reason for me raising this point is because Strategy 23 weave a seamless blend of fact and fiction states one of the main forms of military deception. The false front says the appearance of weakness often brings out people's aggressive side, making them drop strategy and prudence for an emotional and violent attack. And of course, that's what seems to be happening here. Russia being more aggressive now and being more aggressive than ever before, or some of those attacks are quite severe at the moment, or Putin believes that the US are in the process of throwing Ukraine under the bus. Guys, honestly, if you think that this is a load of bollocks, then that's fine. Um, you just got to be mindful of what's being portrayed on the political stage and make a decision on whether you think that's legit or not. And that's it. Moving on to this next piece. Controlling the front you present to the world is the most critical deceptive skill. Let me just say that again. Controlling the front you present to the world is the most critical deceptive skill. This is this one's absolutely key as well, and obvious if it is the strategy. So the US is completely controlling the front and deceptive narrative to the world. Certainly last week, if in fact it is a deception, remember, guys, remember this is just speculation, but I'm just giving you a completely different view of what's going on. Everything in the news right now is all about Trump and the US, NATO and the EU, and the US is controlling that narrative right now. No matter who you talk to, they believe that America and the rest of Europe are falling out. The relationships have come with tensions, and they're keeping everyone guessing. And why? Because only a week or two ago, Trump was calling Zelensky a dictator, and then they're both sat in the White House having a meeting. We had Starmer and Macron in the White House a couple of weeks ago, only to now be against Trump for going against Zelensky. Then this turning, then you've got there's loads. I'm not even going to go through them, okay? But it's out there. It looks like chaos at its best. And when I say that, I mean just on the political stage itself. The next one. The best front here is weakness. Okay, let me say that again. The best front here is weakness, which will make the other side feel superior to you, so that they either ignore you, and being ignored is very valuable at times, or are baited into an aggressive action at the wrong moment. So once it's too late, once it is too late, once they have committed, they can find out the hard way that you are not as weak as after all. So this one's right up there as well. The best front here is weakness, which will make the other side feel superior to you. So Putin, these last couple of weeks will definitely be feeling superior, thinking that he's seeing the NATO alliance and or EU fall apart. In fact, this is genius. If this is what's being played out, this is genius. Moving on to the decoy attack. The key to this tactic is that instead of relying on words or rumors or planted information, remember this. Instead of relying on words or rumors or planted information, the army really moves. It makes a concrete action. So the enemy forces cannot afford to guess whether the deception is in the works. If they guess wrong, the consequences are disastrous. So it's probably a little bit too early to pass verdict on this one at the moment, because with these potential peace talks approaching, the aim here is to get NATO boots on the ground in Ukraine lawfully, shall we say. What do I mean by that? Peacekeeping troops. My ass, right? There's the peacekeeping troops. Anyway, it has to be done. But I'll say this again, ladies and gents. Once you have officially got troops on Ukrainian soil, and this is NATO troops, then that for me is the official or public start of World War III in Europe. Okay, NATO have to be introduced into this war legitimately, shall we say, under the guise of peacekeepers. So, actions carry such weight and seem so real that people will naturally assume that that is your real goal. So, peacekeeping troops on the ground and peace talks on the table is enough to let the masses know that everything's going to be all right and going in the right direction. Unfortunately, peace is also a strategy of war, and is used as an excuse or a reason to move military assets into a region safely under the guise, as it were. So, getting NATO troops on the ground under the guise of peacekeeping. This one down here, camouflage. No, this is the one that I took out. It's just irrelevant. It's not relevant to this video. So I'm just going to move on. There's the hypnotic pattern, and that states human beings naturally tend to think in patterns. This mental habit offers excellent ground for deception. Deliberately create a pattern to make your enemies believe that your next action will follow true to form. Next, you've got the planted information. I like this one as well. So people are much more likely to believe something that they see with their own eyes than something that they are told. They are more likely to believe something they discover than something that's pushed on them. If you plant the false information you desire them to have with third parties in neutral territory, when they pick up the clues, they have the impression that they are the ones discovering the truth. The more you can make them dig for their information, the more deeply they will delude themselves. So we can look at the initial meeting that I think it was a couple of weeks ago now between the US and Russian delegates. It was a pathetic show if any of you have sort of listened to the feedback. But it was something seen by the Russian delegates with their own eyes instead of, some kind of bluster. Getting the Russians to turn up in person is better than having a conversation over the phone. It shows commitment and intent to try and sort this shit out. So obviously conducted on neutral ground in Saudi. However, we don't know what was discussed in those meetings, but my guess is certainly if we're assuming this narrative, that the Americans would have made the Russians believe that they have the upper hand. Next, no matter how good a liar you are, when you deceive, it is hard to be completely natural. Your tendency is to try so hard to seem natural and sincere that it actually stands out, and it can be read. That is why it's so effective to spread your deceptions through people whom you keep ignorant to the truth, people who believe the lie themselves. So this depends on who knows what about the plan. Let's say, for example, Trump and the NATO Secretary General, Mark Rutte, are in on this plan of deception, but the US delegates and all of the other sort of NATO member state representatives, that is, are none of the wiser. Then those representatives, when they go out to meetings and have interviews and stuff like that, are going to be neutral. If being kept ignorant from the truth. So if they don't know what the truth is, then they're just going to be themselves and that's it. They're going to believe the other narrative, the narrative that's being fed out to us lot. Shadows within shadows. Further down here, bosh. Shadows within shadows. So, deceptive maneuvers are like shadows deliberately cast. The enemy responds to them as if they were solid and real, which in and of itself is a mistake. In a sophisticated competitive world, however, both sides know the game, and the alert enemy will not necessarily grasp at the shadow that has been thrown. So that could be that, listen, we're talking about 33 strategies of war strategy 23. All governments are going to be aware of these. Okay, this is just a book anyway, based on sort of key strategies. I'm sure there are they're more sophisticated and then detailed war strategy books out there, but they will be aware of this kind of activity and this kind of approach. So Putin might, all his representatives, or Putin might be sat there thinking, "Yeah, I know what kind of game you're playing." But anyway, that's what we kind of sort of read in here. Yeah. Um, so I said there, yeah, in a sophisticated competitive world, however, both sides know the game and the alert enemy will not necessarily grasp at the shadow that's been thrown. So you have to make the art of deception, or you have to take the art of deception to a level higher, casting shadows within shadows, making it impossible for your enemies to distinguish between fact and fiction. So this level of deception is on another level, not knowing what's true and what isn't, I suppose. Commonly experienced by those deep undercover agents and law enforcement agents out there in the field. They're normally so deep into whatever cover or whatever mission they're involved in that they don't know what's real and what isn't. And the reason why I think that's important and why I'm even doing this video is because the things that I'm sort of the things that are being said and suggested out there on the public and political stage right now, it's actually made me think that this shit is so over the top. Some of it, it's actually it's hard to even believe. It's not even believable. And you'll also find that governments around the world are probably struggling to believe some of it as well. So let's say, for example, that strategy 23 is the intent. Not only have they gone into initial negotiations with Russia, spinning, I don't know, whatever web of deceit there, but now Trump is coming out with whatever statements that people close to him probably might not even be believing either. So, for example, only a couple of weeks ago, suggesting that this whole war is Zelensky's fault and Ukraine started this for themselves. Now, everyone's confused and actually unsure, themselves on sort of what to believe and what not to believe, and questioning all sides of the statements. They're, they're causing a state of chaos amongst the high-profile people, that being people sort of in government and stuff like that, and a state of confusion amongst us numbers or us people on the ground. So whether you believe it or not, it's actually working because I'm confused as fuck. But then that's only because I've allowed myself to sort of get it sort of sucked into this political stuff. I hate politics. It's all bullshit. It's all lies. But to a certain degree, we have to pick it apart and analyze it and look through the smoke and mirrors. And that leads me on to this one. If you are trying to mislead your enemies, it is often better to concoct something ambiguous and hard to read as opposed to an outright deception. So by creating something that is simply ambiguous, though, by making everything blurry, there is no deception to uncover. See, this is good and also makes sense now. Misleading the enemy has to be the primary objective here. Governments are not mugging themselves off to please and keep, the likes of me and you happy. Listen, they don't give a shit about us. They're misleading governments on the same side, to the extent of potential fallout within governments. They're definitely making things seem blurry right now, to millions of people. I don't. Well, hang on. Let's just move this. Right. Okay. Let's just go down to here. I believe deep down, NATO now know that Putin isn't going to stop. And I believe that NATO are confident enough that Putin might, there's a very high chance that he might launch nukes at some point on the West. And with that in mind, NATO have to punish Putin and or put an abrupt stop to his madness. And that doesn't mean nuking Russia, but just hitting him where it hurts, wherever that may be. And with that, as I finish off, I just want to highlight a couple of other sort of relevant ones to you before we sign off. These are just other strategies that they're a lot shorter. I'm just going to, but they can kind of be relevant to what's happening right now. Strategy 9, turn the tables, the counter-attack strategy. So states move in first, initiating the attack, will often put you at a disadvantage. You are exposing your strategy and limiting your options. Instead, discover the power of holding back and letting the other side move first, giving you the flexibility to counter-attack from any angle. If the opponent is aggressive, bait them into a rash attack that will leave them in a weak position. So with that and the Russian invasion, Russia have completely exposed themselves on the battlefield thus far, opening themselves up to NATO, who haven't even started sort of fighting yet, as per se. This one's a good one as well. Strategy 13, know your enemy. So this is the intelligence strategy. The target of your strategy should be less the army you face than the mind of the man or woman that runs it. If you understand how that mind works, you have the key to deceiving and controlling it. So train yourself to read people, picking up the signals they unconsciously send out about their innermost thoughts and intentions. See, the more this war goes on, the more we're learning about Putin, what with, all of the threats that he makes against the West with nuclear attacks and all of the rest of it. Governments around the world are constantly employing these strategies on their adversaries and enemies. They have to understand who they're fighting potentially and what they're likely to be up against. We know that Putin doesn't give a shit. He certainly doesn't give a shit about his own people, the Ukrainian people, and definitely not the North Koreans that are helping him out in various places. He has an agenda, and his only ace card, albeit a powerful ace card, is the large stockpile of nuclear weapons. So, Putin knows that most will do whatever they can to prevent nuclear war. However, he keeps threatening the use of them. So that tells me a couple of things, that the man is dangerous and or stupid. Strategy 15, control the dynamics. So it's forcing strategies. People are constantly struggling to control you. The only way to get the upper hand is to make your plan for control more intelligent and insidious. Instead of trying to dominate the other side's every move, work to define the nature of the relationship itself, maneuver to control your opponent's minds, pushing their emotional buttons and compelling them to make mistakes. See, I can see this happening at the peace talks. NATO need to define the nature of the relationship with Putin first, and then maneuver to control his mind by pushing some of his emotional buttons, forcing him to lose it and come out fighting and making mistakes, of course. It's called emotional provocation. Right, just the last two. Strategy number 16 says, hit them where it hurts. The center of gravity strategy. Everywhere has a source of power on which he or she depends. When you look at your rivals, search below the surface for the source, the center of gravity that holds the entire structure together. Hitting them there will inflict disproportionate pain. Find what the other side most cherishes and protects, and that's where you must strike. Final one, number 17. It also fits well here also. Defeat them in detail. So the divide and conquer strategy, of which most of you would have heard of at some point in your lives. Never be intimidated by your enemy's appearance. Instead, look at the parts that make up the whole. By separating the parts, so in dissension and diversion, a division, sorry, you can bring down the most formidable foe. When you're facing troubles or enemies, turn the large problem into small, eminently defeatable parts. But we can see that China, Iran, Russia are all coming together. We know that NATO and the West are already in an alliance. It seems to me that NATO, without full-blown US support, will have to deal with Russia in Ukraine because, of course, Russia is a direct threat to the rest of Europe. The US will have its hands full dealing with Iran and a heavy focus on China. North Korea are now a direct target for the West. So with the North Koreans fighting in Ukraine now and still threatening to nuke the West, we've got South Korea, Japan, and the US and others actually in the region ready to deal with North Korea. And I think that conflict, to be fair, will be ruthless but quick. A kind of teach them a lesson, sort of decapitative sort of strike kind of scenario. I think they're not going to want to mess about with that one for too long. We've then got the US keeping close eyes on China, pushing military assets into that region and priming other countries such as Australia to be ready. But the only disadvantage for America in a conventional war is going to be obviously the logistics. So America is over, what is it, 7,000 miles from China, hence the reason why the assets are being moved into the regions up front, I suppose. I'm not sure we'll see all that war between the US and China anytime soon, but then what do I know? So, ladies and gents, I've enjoyed getting this information out there because I just think it's relevant, really, and it just gives you a completely different perspective and a different possibilities and different reasons as to why we're seeing and hearing, these critical statements being made right across the world at the moment in different countries on different platforms. Always try and look at the different sides of the story and just keep an open mind. So, with that, guys, get yourselves military fit, you lazy bunch. Get yourselves infantry wear, and I will be back soon.